to Keen on Green with Evan Rigsby, the podcast that dives deep into the world of environmental consulting from a multitude of perspectives. Join your host, Evan Rigsby, as he explores the intricate challenges and innovative solutions within the environmental sector. Whether you're a professional in the field, a student looking to make a difference, or simply a curious listener, this podcast promises to deliver interviews with experts and real-world case studies. Stay tuned as we unravel the green mysteries with Evan, one episode at a time.
Today, I'm joined by Melvin Stroble, who is the Director of Power Services over at EA Engineering, Science, and Technology. Now, Melvin, for those of you who don't know, oversees EA's energy sector portfolio, client relations, and is an absolute true expert in his space. His extensive experience covers natural gas pipelines, liquefied natural gas terminals, electric generation, transmission, distribution, renewable energy projects. I don't have enough air in my lungs for the vast array of experiences Melvin has covered. Join us today as Melvin shares his story, his insights into the industry, his experiences. And on a personal note, Melvin was somebody that I got to talk with and learn from very, very early in my recruiting career. Melvin, thanks so much for joining us today.
Of course, Evan, and I want to thank you so much for that complimentary introduction. For a moment there, I wasn't sure who you were speaking of.
Fun fact for everybody on the podcast, Melvin is also the sharpest dressed professional in the industry. And every time I've talked with him, he is always donning a very sharp bow tie.
Well, thank you, Evan. And my number of bow ties now exceed 100. So we certainly will have a different one each time you and I speak.
Amazing. So to kick it off, Melvin, my first question for you is, could you, tell the viewers a little bit about yourself and, what you do about EA? And, off of that question, I know it from talking with you, but your journey and, how you got there, your time at Black and Veatch, and a little bit about your background.
Certainly. And Evan, having been in the industry for 37 years, I'm just going to give a thumbnail sketch of my background and my experiences. So my background, I graduated from the great University of South Carolina, Gamecock country, of course known as the Harvard in the South, and started work with a utility that is a mixed utility of electric and gas. Started work at a nuclear facility as a biologist coming out of college. And my career through that company included not only serving as a biologist, but moving over while I was over in the nuclear arena into radiation protection, which was at that time known as corporate health physics. Left that and moved over into our corporate environmental arena of our company, where I served as supervisor for biology, ecology, geology, and air, and helped promote some and start some of our field air monitoring programs for the electric generation side of our company. I also moved later into our administration and served as manager of total quality management, later became director of corporate safety and health, then moved over into HR and did team building, and moved back into environmental and went over into our gas side, where I served as the environmental program manager for environmental services, which included both operations and capital projects. Mm-hmm. After a 20-year stint in industry, I made the move over into consulting. And the first company I worked with there was Natural Resource Group, which is now ERM. And keep in mind that some of the companies I reference have changed, but I was with NRG and worked on a multitude of gas projects, particularly large pipeline projects that were interstate projects that usually were 100 miles plus. Then after the downturn in the economy, I became an independent consultant and started my own consulting firm and was very blessed at that time to have several clients who called on me and started working for them. The work was so great, Evan, that I had to find a company to connect with to support me with resources. And one of the things all of us understand in the consulting industry is that while you're working on your current projects, you also must do marketing and building a backlog. And so if you're the person doing all the work, the latter part, marketing and building the backlog, becomes less of a focus. And so joining a firm later to help me with resources became GAI Consultants. Great company. I enjoyed working with them for the period of time and also served as the Charlotte, North Carolina office manager with GAI Consultants. I left GAI Consultants and moved over to Black & Veatch, which is another great firm, of course, much, much larger in size than GAI. And for Black & Veatch, I served as the Southeastern, or actually the East Coast Business Development Manager for environmental and was their subject matter expert, SME, for oil and gas activities in the Gulf Coast with the Gulf Coast states. And so I was with Black & Veatch for about 6 years. And then I had this great opportunity with EA. And I'm currently serving as the Director of Power Services with EA. And as the Director of Power Services, I support our operational business units in building and maintaining strong client relationships, ensuring client satisfaction, and identifying and pursuing new business opportunities. I also work to develop proposals and participate in sale presentations and negotiations and support project execution, which I enjoy doing. And also continuing to serve as a subject matter expert in the power industry areas and looking to continue to help my company grow and improve our organizational performance.
I think, first of all, what a wonderful career. I don't even know what to say. I'm speechless. I think one of the things you hit, and I think this would be a huge value add for maybe someone who's younger, who's in college right now, looking to get into the industry, maybe somebody who's more seasoned, as like yourself, where you came out of that industry into consulting, and you talk about both sides, the projects, being the technical expert, and then also with marketing and relationships. Relationships, every time we've spoken, you have been huge. Those relationships you foster. Can you talk a little bit about that? I think it's fantastic you had your own company. You've been helping these other firms. Can you go a little bit into that with the projects you've done, but also those relationships that you built along the way, because that's always from like a long-term mindset.
Right. One of the things I also remind not only young professionals, but our existing mature professionals is the saying, you never know who you're going to wind up working for. Mm-hmm. And if you keep that in mind, you will continue to build meaningful relationships with the people who are above you and the people who are your peers and those who are new in the industry. Building those meaningful relationships is important, and you learn that early on, particularly if you are a Southerner. Everyone in the South understands that you have to have relationships because you never know who you're going to go to and ask to borrow a cup of sugar. So we learned that early on as we were growing up, and that's one of our mantras. But as in the industry, the basis for relationship is getting to know an individual beyond the professional environment, learning who they are, about their family, and getting to know them on a personal level, and they getting to know you. So as those relationships develop and people move and move upward into organizations, that gives you an opportunity to stay connected and to help them succeed.
Mm-hmm.
Relationships is not about what I get out of it, but it should be how can I help those people who I've developed those relationships with be successful in their organizations or in their careers. We're here to help each other move up and continue to grow. And if you're in the industry or trying to develop a network so to see what you can get out of it, it will not be as successful as if you are developing your network to say, how can I help the next person?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, off of that, I know you've been to a lot of functions within the power industry. You've met a lot of folks throughout your career, you know, especially with what you're doing at EA. What's your take? What's your perspective on the power industry now? But also, where is it heading? In your opinion, what do you think is going to happen or maybe change in the not so far away future?
Yeah, Evan, that's a good question. I think everyone in the industry and in the environmental consulting field will agree that it is evolving rapidly in response to changing environmental regulations, increasing public awareness of environmental issues, and advances in technology. So,
Hmm.
some of the key trends that are likely shaping the field over the next few years include climate change adaptation and mitigation. As we
Hmm.
look at the impacts of climate change becoming more severe, there will be a growing demand for consultants like EA who can help organizations adapt to those impacts and reduce their carbon footprints.
Hmm.
Another one we're seeing is sustainable development. And we hear the buzzword sustainable a lot, but there's an increasing emphasis on sustainable development practices such as green building, renewable energy, where consultants can help organizations navigate these particular trends that are becoming in high demand. The other one is ESG, environmental, social, and governance. More and more organizations are realizing the importance of ESG and are being required to report on ESG performance in many of their either annual reports in their organizations internally or in some of the compliance reporting or SEC reporting that they're doing. Um, the two ones that I'm really excited about is environmental justice, where we are finding people having an increased awareness of the disproportionate impacts on marginalized communities and how we can help our organizations ensure that we're minimizing impacts to these overburdened communities. And the other one is digital transformation, advances in technology such as artificial intelligence, AI, machine learning, big data analytics. Those sort of things are transforming the way environmental consultants and organizations are doing their work today. And of course, regulatory compliance continues to be complex and stringent. And so we're there to help our clients navigate those concerns as well and to be successful in that arena.
So off of that, and I think some big highlights, you talked about environmental justice, you talked about some of the litigation out there. Um, our job and your job, with talking with the public and seeing the awareness that's out there, you know, how is the public's reception to this? Do you see a lot of change happening right now? Where do you kind of see, the public's perception on a lot of these topics, and what changes are happening? What are you seeing right now?
Yeah, it's interesting. We are seeing the public become more aware
Mm.
in general. There's always been NGOs or special environmental groups who have followed and looked at each major capital project in the power industry. But we're beginning to see that broaden or expanded now into local communities where many of our organizations, our clients, are operating. So it is important for our clients to understand that their relationships with the community needs to move beyond project basis to a meaningful, programmatic, long-lasting relationship in those communities. And so that the communities know the organization, they know the people, and they understand the goals of the organization overall and come in to work to help mitigate or resolve any concerns they have. When we start talking about community involvement, community engagement, keep in mind that usually the concerns extend beyond the technical concerns of a project or operations. And so there are other items in the community that they may be looking to for our organization to support them in, whether it's health related or transportation related matters.
I guess one question off that is going back to your role with EA, what does a sample day look like? For what you're doing at your desk. And I know it's a million different things, but can you talk a little bit about, sort of what a sample week looks like for you and what you and your team do?
Yes. So, for us, each day, one of the things we focus on first is continuing to be responsive to our clients and looking at how we maintain and grow our existing client base and making sure that we are delivering high quality products to our clients. Secondly, we look at our business development strategy. Who do we need to be reaching out to and continuing to stay in contact with? And also looking at industry trends. And so as we're seeing changes, whether they're mergers and acquisitions, or we're seeing new technology that is being discussed, or emerging regulations, or pollutants of concern, we want to stay on top of that. And how then do we communicate these lessons learned or new regulations to the clients we serve? And how do we implement those changes in-house to ensure that we're continuing to provide the best response and solutions to our clients? So every day we are continuing to execute our projects in a high efficient and responsive manner. We are continuing to look at how we continuing to build that relationship and discussions with our clients, not only on projects, but just on a organization's programmatic environmental matters, and helping them to look around the bend and over the horizon at what they can be expecting associated with compliance and monitoring. Thirdly, we are looking at, again, strategies, constantly updating our strategies and ensuring that we're staying relevant in the industry. And the fourth piece of that is what we talked about earlier, Evan, is our network. How do we continue to maintain and grow the network so that as we're looking at what our company does as a full service environmental firm, how do we support other businesses that may be small disadvantaged businesses or minority or veteran-owned businesses? How do we partner with them and build alliances, strategic alliances with some of the larger firms so that we can provide those specialized or unique services to them?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. And I think for a lot of people who see our industry more from a high level, you hear the larger firms.
Right.
And, a lot of them don't hear the smaller firms, or I should even say some of the mid-sized firms too. For the viewers out there, I mean, what's your take on, being able to merge that gap between some of the other firms, no matter the size or background? How do you kind of see that happening?
I think in today's environment, it's important for big, medium-sized, and small-sized firms to realize that we it's difficult to be the one-stop shop for everything. And if we are building a community of environmental firms that are responsive to the needs of our industry and communities, that then
Mm-hmm.
we must look at how we bridge that gap to begin working together.
Mm-hmm.
Large firms have a national footprint. So
Mm-hmm.
they're able to work in multiple states and bring in the value of having a varied experience across the board. Mid-sized firms similarly have regional geographic footprints and
Mm-hmm.
can bring to bear similar experiences, but more on a regional level. And then our small firms are the local firms that help drive the economy in those communities. And so it is
Mm-hmm.
important that we connect with them also to help grow those communities, those small businesses, so that as environmental professionals, people who are interested in coming into our professional, if they want to stay local to
Mm-hmm.
their hometown, those small local firms give them the ability to do that. Whereas national firms may not always have offices in that locale and they'll have to relocate.
Absolutely. And I think one thing that resonated is you talk about, there's a perception sometimes that a firm has to be everything, all disciplines, all different groups. But a lot of times having those specialties and being able to share a little bit of the pie opens it up a little bit, you know?
Right. And that's important because one of the things I think many professionals across the board will agree is that we all have synergies and our services that can complement each other. And if we
Mm-hmm.
work together, we are giving our clients the best solution. And we're also helping our client continue to have meaningful relationships in those communities that they are operating in and serving.
I think one question that comes to mind as we kind of wrap up our last 10 minutes on the episode here is one of the most common questions I've gotten so far from viewers is they say, Evan, I want to get into the industry. I don't know how. I want to, do I talk with certain folks? Do I read this? And what I always kind of tell them is it's never a magic bullet solution. One thing fits all. But from your take, your advice, your perspective, for somebody who wants to get into the industry, who wants to maybe get into environmental justice, who wants to work for a small or large firm, what would some piece of advice from your perspective for someone just getting started but not sure what to do first?
Yeah, interesting, Evan. Just this earlier part of this year, I had some students from one of the colleges, universities in North Carolina reach out to me. They're in environmental engineering, and they said, "Hey, we want to understand how do we break into the environmental consulting arena early on? What are some career options for us?" So you're absolutely right in that that is becoming a common question as we are, as an industry, encouraging more young people to look at STEM programs. And so what I first would share with folks is, again, look for networking events. There are a multitude of opportunities when you look at some of the trade associations and our federal and state agency workshops that offer either free or reduced pricing for students to start getting involved in. At those networking events and conferences or workshops, not only go there to learn, but take
Mm-hmm.
the time to introduce yourself to folks and meet individuals. The
Mm-hmm.
second thing I would encourage folks to look for is career fairs in our industry. Even if, particularly if you are a junior in college and senior, go meet people who are out there saying, "Hey, we want you. We're looking for you," and learn about the opportunities that exist and the skill sets that folks are looking for and that they're willing to train on. In addition to that, there are a couple of resources that I would recommend folks also begin to look at. One of the books that I think that is great is the Environmental Consultant's Handbook by Ian Broughton. So that's one that I found very helpful to individuals to help them along the way. And another one that I would recommend not only for newcomers, but those who are mature in the industry, and particularly those who are working inside an environmental division in an organization, private industry, is Consulting on the Inside, a Practical Guide for Internal Consultants by Beverly Scott and Kim Barnes. I think that's B. Kim Barnes. So those would be great. And of course, there's a lot of social media out there. And the number one podcast I would recommend for folks is Keen on Green with Evan Rigsby.
You are the best. I love you, my friend.
That followed by Green Biz 350 and the sustainability agenda are several other ones, but there's a multitude out there of things and websites folks can get involved in. The Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, even the Corps of Engineers have some workshops and websites that they recommend for folks to look at. There are several magazines, which I won't name, that are available that gives you industry insights. Folks can start reviewing. So again, I would recommend that folks start by contacting individuals who are in the consulting industry, environmental consulting industry, and when you start talking to them, trust me, they will gladly share information with you. Look for those workshops and those networking opportunities, and that will be most helpful in your journey. The last thing I would say, which you didn't ask, Evan, but I would encourage folks as they're coming into the industry to avoid being pigeonholed in one area. Try to be a generalist early on. Learn a little bit about all the aspects of environmental consulting. If you find an area that speaks to you, that you like, then yes, dive into that and become the subject matter expert. But I love when folks are like a sponge and they're soaking it all in early on and learning more about the industry and about themselves. I would encourage everyone, particularly my young professionals, to continue to seek a mentor early in their career, someone who they can talk to that can help guide them through their career choices.
I think that last one is a very, very, very undervalued one. And there's a lot of great mentors out there. And sort of like you said, regardless of discipline and regardless of practice area, there's mentors for anything, but you have to go and ask. You have to go and pursue it. And so forth. Melvin, my very last question to you, and for the podcast here, is sort of what you mentioned before, but anything that I might not have mentioned, anything else for you personally, even outside of environmental, that's been a great mentor for you, someone who's been special to you, maybe a movie or a book that just really stood out to you that helped you to where you are today. Anything at all. I'll throw the wild card question.
Yeah, that's very good. I have a saying, and it's and I can't remember the name of the movie that starred Denzel Washington, and it was about a runaway train incident. But one of the things that was very clear in the movie, which I think we all need to remember, is we are the captains of our fate and the master of our careers. We should be managing our career. And to say that is oftentimes you find yourself in places that are not speaking to you in a positive way. And I don't want folks to become discouraged and disenfranchised with the industry. What I will tell them is, and as I was speaking of the movie, Denzel Washington's career had slid back because of an incident. So he was now a dispatch operator, where before he was a manager over the operations. And he shared with folks who asked him, how did he feel about that? And he said, keep in mind, this is temporary. It is only temporary because I control my career and I do not plan to stay in this position. I will continue to move forward. And so I want to share with folks that you may find yourself again in positions that's not where you want to be at the time. But be true to yourself, be confident, and know that it is only temporary. And for those folks who are managing, and like me in the director's positions, always remember we're there to develop people, not manage people. We develop people and continue to manage work processes, but we should be developing the next generation of environmental consultants.
I couldn't have asked for a better ending. A better ending, my friend. But thank you, Melvin. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, sharing your insights. It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining us today.
Evan, it's been my pleasure. And to promote Keen on Green, my walls are green behind me.
Hey, I love it. I love it. But to everybody watching and listening, thank you so much for being a viewer of the show. What I'm going to do, if you're curious in talking with Melvin and the EA team, I will be linking Melvin's bio if you'd like to talk with him directly. And thank you, everybody. And that is a wrap on episode 2 of Keen on Green. Thanks, Melvin.
Thank you, Kevin.